Hey everyone, so this is my basement. You can see right there, we had some water damage, still hasn't been fixed yet. Right there, this is my Peloton tread. We stopped the Peloton subscription, but still have it, still run every once in a while. And then back here, got my arcade machines right there. Got my TV and got a digital pinball. Yeah, so this is my little slice of heaven. But yeah, before we get started, and this won't be a typical length of how our normal meetings are. I'm not going to sit here and record for 3 hours because there's no interaction. So it'll be a little bit quicker. You're welcome. I sent an email in case you didn't see it. So I was wrong. There was supposed to be a discussion board post for this week, and next week was when our counselor interview was due. So it wouldn't be really fair of me right now to be like, nope, change it. So here's what I'm going to do. We're just going to make both of those due as if they were assigned this week. So they'll be due November 13th, 4 p.m. So whatever order you want to do them in, you do them in. If you've already submitted the counselor interview or did that and you want to knock that off your plate, you can. If you want to go back and do the discussion board, I believe, is actually based on the video we watched, the two videos we watched in class. Don't talk about the fish hand. So if you want to do those, and because of that too, it wouldn't be fair because since it's a different time frame for me to ask you still to reflect on two. So just reflect on one and you'll get the points. Favor to ask if you can. I know it might be tougher to do, and if we can't do it, we can't do it. But just so everyone maybe gets a little bit of feedback, if you could, after you post, when you reflect on one, please reflect on one, or try, I should say, to reflect on one that no one else has yet. Just because since we're only doing one reflection, it at least gives everyone a chance to get some sort of feedback or reflection from the class. But again, the counselor interview, the module 6 discussion board will be due the 13th at 4 p.m. Everything out there, the quiz from this week or whatever, that's still due normal time. Uh, okay, so now I am going to start sharing my screen and we will start talking about REBT. We'll see if my daughters pop theirs in here. Um, I have my headphone and I have noise canceling on, but so hopefully there isn't too much external feedback, but if there is, I apologize. You understand. So REBT, which is kind of a part of CBT. What's cool about this is I like talking about this one because um, you guys have probably heard me talk about Paul a lot. And also keep in mind, my eyes are going to be going nuts because there's a camera here and there's a presentation here, but my face is here. So you might just see me going all over the place. So Paul Genovese, he's our post-secondary counselor. He actually, when I interviewed him for a class in my doc program, asked him where he comes from, and he said he comes from rational emotive behavioral therapy. You don't really think about it, but there's a couple of reasons. First one is, as you know, with REBT, sometimes there's that expert role. I'll also be looking down because I got my lesson plans down here too. Sometimes there's that expert role, and sometimes in a post-secondary setting, talking about life after high school, you need to play that expert role. So um, that is why he has said that is kind of part of his jam. Uh, Turning perceived weaknesses into strengths. A lot of times with Paul, kids are coming in with something that they think is a weakness or is a blind spot or something they're doing wrong or something they can't do. And he's having to show them a lot, no, this is why it is a strength for you because of da 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 da. And then focusing on the present. I think with planning for life after high school, naturally our students start thinking about everything they've done and they also think about everything they have to do and everything they're going to do in the future. So it is important to try to sort of just, live in the moment with it. And so, all these, it was actually funny because I kind of had to remind Paul about REBT. Because in the school counseling setting, you don't really think about theories too much. I'll be honest with you, but it was funny because as he's telling me this, I'm like, bro, this, and I point out, he's like, oh wow, I'm like, you know more than you know, buddy. So REBT, um, we do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. That's pretty deep. That's pretty deep thinking about it. Like it's all coming from us. So let's get into it. All right, there we go. So we got the man, the myth, dare I say the legend. We got Albert Ellis. I mean, let's talk about those glasses, right? Just letting people know what's up. So again, another example of someone that came from another theory, was jamming with that theory and was kind of like, it's okay, but I'm not the biggest fan of it, right? So he was, psychoanalysis, and he was just saying it was taking too long, and it's not like almost wasn't direct enough. It's funny if you watch any, if you could find any sessions with Albert Alice, you'll definitely see. Um, yeah, and he was, more active. He was direct and kind of that psycho-ed approach where it wasn't just like, we're just going to talk and you're going to tell me about your feelings. It's like, okay, but you are going to take away something from this. You're going to learn something from this session. He had, there's some core ideas that he brought to it with, that are in place now. So it's not about like what has happened to us or what we are doing, what has been done, but this number one. But kind of how we perceive it. That's a pretty deep thought if you think about it. It's things happen. Uh, kind of a little different from trauma informed, right? Trauma informed is really focused on that. This is what happened in your past, and this is why you do it now. Whereas REBT is kind of like, okay, this is what happened, but it's not necessarily that is why you are the way you are, why you chose what you did. It's just how you process that. I mean, definitely think about kids. I mean, maybe I'm throwing a bias in here, but I could definitely see why this is something that would work with kids, right? Because it's all about like, well, how did you feel? How do you think about that? Why did you do that? Um, similar to Buddha, what we think we become, right? Our mind's a very powerful thing. I mean, that's kind of why like placebo, there's the placebo effect, right? It's like if we believe something enough, if we pull this down a little bit, if we believe something enough, like we're gonna think it's true, right? That's why, you know, fake pills sometimes in studies, right? The placebo effect. It's if I believe it's going to work, it's going to work. A lot of times when I'm trying to get students to visualize or kind of think positively or be optimistic, there's a study that was done, excuse me, where there was basketball players and they're split in half, and a couple of them practiced. I believe it was free throws. I might be wrong, but it was something related to basketball, and other ones just kind of visualized it and imagined they could do it. Lo and behold, the ones that didn't practice but imagined it, they did better. I think about I had a student. She was really just wanting to be in our cheer program. If you know anything about BG, right? We win like state championships every other year. Our cheer coach just got into the like National Cheer Hall of Fame. Um, but like she was worried because she couldn't do a backflip, whatever they call them now, right? My daughter's in gymnastics. And I'm learning all these terms don't mean anything. Um, but like she was just like, I'm just worried I'm not gonna be able to do it. And I'm like, hey, I just want you to before you do it, just kind of give yourself a positive mantra, like an affirmation. Like, listen, I can do this. Like, I've done it before. I'm gonna nail it now. Like, just keep repeating that to yourself and be like, it ain't a thing. Sure enough, she had been struggling with backflips. She gets there during her tryout. It's her by herself on the mat with all the coaches. She does her whatever, and then boom, nails it. So again, I'm a practical learner. That's one way I kind of connect the dots with things. And then it helps people identify and change irrational thoughts that cause negative emotions and behaviors. So that's kind of these all kind of tie together, right? If our past isn't our past, it's how we processed our past. Then let's move it here. How are you processing it? How are you getting through it? How are you thinking about it? How you perceive it? And if it's not positive, can we reframe it? Can we kind of change that thinking to get it to be positive? So how does REBT see people? So rationally and irrationally, right? So I think that goes back to, we're wanting people to think positively, but we also understand that's not always the case, right? Again, sorry, motivational interviewing. There's change talk and sustain talk. It's like, hey, we want people to talk about what they want to change, what they want to do different, but we know there is still sustain talk, right? And we got to acknowledge that and recognize that. The irrational thinking, again, that's, what we just talked about. I think it makes sense, right? That if we have that irrational thought, things are not gonna go our way, right? That you're at, we got up here, the irrational thought leads to self-hate, can lead to self-destructive behavior, can lead to hatred of others, right? That's kind of like that butterfly effect, where if you start with an irrational thought, it can really bleed into the rest of your life. Whereas maybe the positive makes it positive, right? So, great example of that. This figure was on page 380. Uh, just look at like this vicious circle. Frank engages in irrational thinking. He hates himself. That's the self-hate. Engages in self-destructive behavior. Maybe he's isolating himself. Maybe his social life is suffering, or maybe he's being more introvert. Sorry, I jumped the gun, right? He's not pleasant to be around, which then again gets him to hate others, which ruins his social life. And then if he's mean to others, how do others react towards him? And then it just keeps going on this circle. Um, but from REBT, they are thinking we we get to decide, right? We have these thoughts, and there's a yin and a yang to each, but like we get to pick which thoughts are we going to follow. Like Frank has this irrational thought. Is he going to just run with that, or is he going to think of the other side of the coin and go to that? Is he going to try to find the good in the situation and go to that? So, I think this is, kind of ties a little bit in with solution focus, where it's like, solution focus, it's like if you're working with a kid and like I'm on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a two. It's like, well, you're not a one. So tell me why you're a two. Choosing the power. Okay, I have these two thoughts. Well, you're choosing to maybe take the positive one. How's that look? And then again, this last one I think is big. It makes me think of when, I told you about when Reagan talked to my group about MI, and first thing he said was MI isn't for every situation. And people were like, whoa, okay, that's new. The goal isn't to be happy all the time, but to handle life's difficulties without becoming emotionally disturbed. Like it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to be upset. Um, it's okay to not feel great all the time, but how are you going to handle it? Right? You have a bad day at work, you don't want it to tank your career. You have a bad day with your partner in a relationship, you don't want it to end there. It's how are you going to handle it without becoming emotionally disturbed? How are you going to handle it without kind of it cutting too deep? And you kind of just, again, hate for yourself, which then kind of bleeds into how you interact with others and impact in the rest of your life. So if I had music here, we'd probably have the Jackson 5 ABC, easy as one, two, three, right? So the ABC, this is the foundation of understanding how problems develop. So you got that activating event. That's the A. So why am I feeling this way? What happened? For example, I failed the math test. That leads into this belief system. So what you tell yourself, and this is really important, right? This is where the road can kind of split. Do we go with the negative or do we go with the positive? So in this instance, it goes with the negative. So because I failed this math test, I am just a total failure. And then C, the emotional and behavioral result of your belief. So feeling depressed and giving up. And remember, A does not cause C, B causes C. And I think it makes sense if we're kind of looking into everything we talked about leading up until this point. It's not that something happened and then it went here, which is kind of weird because we're teaching, if we're thinking about when we work with kids, we're all about that. Well, you did this, and now this is the consequence, right? So this is a little different from that, but it's how you process it with REBT. It is, that's why it's called rational emotive, right? It's and behavior. It's the emotion and behavior behind it. It is, so this happened. How did you perceive it? What do you believe? What are you telling yourself about it? So B causes C. So I mean, kind of from an REBT perspective, A could be just about anything. Be the high of the high, the low of the low, the middle of the middle. But it's that B part. It is that, well, then what happened? How did you interpret it? And then that leads to C. So now this was going to be a group discussion, but obviously we are not together. So I want you just to think about it. It says REBT says we often upset ourselves with rigid demands we place on ourselves, others, and the world. These often sound like shoulds, must, and oughts. So kind of like, holding ourselves to these standards. So think about some common shoulds or musts that you hear from friends and just kind of how do you feel about them, right? How do you feel about them? Brainstorm them and then let's think about how kids perceive this, right? Because it's all day kids are being talked at and they're being told you should do this, you ought to do this, you must do this. So then if we're looking at those ABCs, they have that activating result or that activating event, right? And then their belief system is can be based on I should do this, I must do this, I ought to be this, and then think about how it could have an impact in who they what they do next and their consequences and their behavior and their feelings. So um yeah, just think about that, right? Again, we want to be practical. We want to be able to take these theories and think about how they look in real world circumstances. So again, we will skip this for right now, but what I would want you to do is take a look at page 382 and 383, the demandingness and irrational behaviors. Take a look at what those are, um, and think about how they could impact the counseling relationships, right? Here is a quote from that section. These rigid systems of thought have patterns that lead to emotional problems. Frustration intolerance refers to perceived inability to withstand frustration of the activating event. One other thought pattern that creates upset is human worth ratings. Those beliefs evaluate self, others, and the world as not ever enough and therefore worthless. Di Giuseppe, that's a fun last name, reminds us that people cannot be rated as either good or bad because it's impossible to be completely one or the other. I think I'm good all the time. Okay. Some other patterns of thought that lead to problems are I can't stand it and or always and never thinking. Di Giuseppe provided a table that lists referral problems of children, behavior, and emotional correlates and the irrational beliefs that accompany the problems. So this frustration intelligence, inability to withstand frustration of an activating event, right? So if you go to that ABC, if that A is negative, the behavior is just, I can't, I'm always going to be frustrated and it's always going to upset me. I can't kind of see the other side. And then I like that human worth rating, right? It's world is not never enough, right? It's just being that pessimistic. And I like how it says that, no one can be good or bad all the time, right? There's dips everywhere. Yeah, just a good kind of explanation of those. So again, right, speeding through it, go to page 384, 385. I think you will find some pretty interesting common irrational beliefs. I would say Um, take a look at those and just see like if you can kind of, you know, think of have some aha moments where you're like, oh yeah, I've seen that with a kid, or oh yeah, I can remember myself in a younger age being like that. So we got the ABCs, now we got the D and the E, right? What are the D's and the E's? Actually, I want to go back to the uh what I want to look at. The irrational base, some common ones across age groups, right? This was demanding this. Common irrational behaviors. I must be loved. Things are awful. It's easier to avoid life's difficult situations than to believe them. Some of the irrational behaviors across age groups. These are on 384, 385. Yeah. So I just want to talk about a couple of them real quick. For children, a couple of irrational behaviors. It's awful if others don't like me. I'm bad if I make a mistake. Everything should go my way. So think about some kids you've worked with, think about some kids you've interacted with, and think about if you've ever kind of heard those. I would bet a mortgage payment you have. Adolescence, so getting a little bit older, it would be awful if other kids did not like me. It's my parents' fault that I'm so miserable. Better to avoid challenges than to risk being a failure. So as you're looking at with adolescence, with children, it was kind of a little more looking at me like if I am bad if I make mistakes, but then you're looking at adolescence, it's kind of looking at the that almost that sociology that those external factors. Other kids don't like me. It's not my fault. It's my parents. If I see something, I'm just gonna stay away from it. And then for parents, it's kind of internalizing. I must be a perfect parent. My child or makes me angry, depressed, and anxious. So again, now we got the ABCs. Easy as one, two, three, but we're gonna throw in DE because that rhymes for me. Heyo. All right. So two more letters. So we got disputing. It's where the counselor challenges the irrational behaviors, the B. Where's the evidence that failing one test makes, so going back to that math thing, right? So where is the evidence failing one test makes you a total failure? What's that belief helping you, right? And this goes back to what I was saying with post-secondary counselor I work with Paul in having to, challenge, but also take, hey, you think this is a shortcoming, a problem, a reason you can't do this. Um, but I would ask why, or you think this, but like why? Like how is that helping you? So yeah, it's kind of just looking at it's recognizing when they have that irrational behavior and then just kind of saying, but why? Right? How is that you're wanting to get here? How is this? Why is this there? Like how is this helping you? And then effective new philosophy kind of develops a more rational, flexible, and helpful way of thinking. I'm disappointed I failed the test, but it's not the end of the world. It just means I need to study differently next time, right? So this is looking at so this example I think is looking at the negative side of things, right? So this went wrong, but like there's that education piece, right? That psycho ed piece that Albert Ellis loved. It's all right, yeah, it didn't go well, but what could you learn from it? What can you take away from it? So yeah, I think ABCDE kind of walks us through everything. Like something happens, you believe that it why it happened or what it means or what it's telling you, excuse me. And then C is how you act towards it. And then you bring the counselor in. There's the D where it's I'm going to challenge this thought a little bit, especially if it's a negative thought. Or irrational belief, excuse me. Like I'm going to come in there and be like, well, how this why? And then E is okay, so now how do we prevent this? How do we either prevent this from happening or stop this from having a major kind of impact on you? God, look at that outfit. I mean, I could pull that off, I think. Um, so what is it? What is an REBT counselor? Where do we fall in this relationship? It's important, but it's not the main tool, right? Again, this is really about how the client perceives things. Is it rational, irrational? Is it positive? Is it negative? And how are we going to challenge it? Like a teacher or a coach, right? It is me just showing you things, trying to educate you, ask why, right? Challenge sometimes. Think about a teacher. Think about those great teachers you've had. You've had those great teachers. They're gonna have a lot of these characteristics here, but like the first thing I'm thinking about is looking at REBT, you have that teacher that kind of challenges you to be your best or pushes you when you have kind of not the greatest view on things. But they are going to educate you. They're going to try to teach you. They're going to try to get you to that aha moment. Characteristics, active and direct, right? Not beating around the bush. Again, if we go back to that example of, the D and E, it was, well, how is this helping? Why are you thinking this? How is this getting you to where you want to get? Humor, right? It helps keep things lighthearted. Assign homework. Again, kind of coming from that realm of CBT where it's I want you to do this and I want you to see how it works. I want you to try something. I want you, very similar to solution focused. I want to show you that this is not the only way things have to be, that there are other ways to do things. Let's try this. Let's see what happens. Self acceptance. Listen, kind of recognize that we all make mistakes and you're human, right? There is no one out there, like it said earlier, that is always great, that is always bad. Everyone, maybe the yin yang should be like a symbol for this, right? Because it's got the black and the white. You could say the black is bad and the white is good, but there's that little dot of the other in each of them. So yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. Again, I'm not going to do this, but maybe something to think about, maybe something to try, maybe something to do with AI. It's kind of cool. Maybe I'll show you guys in class. I built this custom Google Gemini gem for motivational interviewing that when I do my presentation at the ISCA conference, it's going to allow people to actually practice MI and it's going to give them feedback and tell them how it went. And so, yeah, maybe you talk to AI about this and you paint the picture. Listen, I'm a school counselor practicing REBT, and here's the scenario. Uh, how do I do it? Friend is applying for a part-time job they really want. After the interview, they don't get the job. They say, this is catastrophic. This is blah, 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 blah. That's number two. This is a catastrophe. I'm so stupid. I will never get a job. I can't stand this feeling of rejection. So, counselor, come up with two of the D's and then help them get to the E, right? So, challenge it, dispute it, and see if they can get that talk going towards the effective rational belief. So, maybe try it with a friend. Again, maybe plug it into AI and see if you can practice it. Or maybe next time we meet in class, grab someone before we start and say, hey, let's talk about REBT. Let me practice because that's what we do for fun, right? So we got the 7 factors to detect irrational thinking. So number one, overgeneralization, right? So making just kind of these big over assumptions of just because of this, it is that, right? Because I failed a math test, I am just dumb. Distortions, right? Just views that are just they're just not they don't add up, and you got to challenge that. And we got deletions, like removing things. Catastrophes, just had an example of that. Because this happened, my world is over. Absolute thinkings, those all or nothings, that's very irrational. Rarely is anything either 100% one way or the other. Condemning, right? Just having that bias and that viewpoint of why this is wrong. And then fortune telling, just trying to predict the future. Oh, because of this, right? Because I'm in 8th grade and I failed a social science class, I am never going to have any friends, right? So it's just trying to look into that future and be like, no, you can't predict the future from this one event. This one isn't, again, it's not the event, it's how you perceive it. So I'd say if you want to get a little more detailed on each of these, look at page 387, 388. That can kind of help you dive into it a little more. So let's look at this A, B, C, D, E. So obviously this was something where we were going to do it with someone and we were going to kind of walk through it and see of an example of using A, B, C, D, E. And I'll walk you through one example. And then it'd be great if maybe you just took a minute or two just to kind of process and think about if you could walk through an example and see how you could get I keep saying student, I apologize, the client or the student to E. So activating Maya saw pictures on social media of her friends at a party she wasn't invited to. No, that's always the worst. This is horrible. It means they all hate me now, right? So she believes because everyone else is at this party and she isn't, there's something wrong with her and her social life is done. So what are the consequences of that? Well, she saw that, and then what path did she take? She took the low road, and now she's feeling depressed and worthless, intense anxiety about seeing her friends, anger and jealousy. So it's all these thoughts that can definitely, if we went back to that circle, could really just have a vicious circle for her. So as a counselor, I'm going to say, so where's the proof that your friends actually hate you? Like, isn't there any other possible reasons why you weren't invited? Like, can we explore? Maybe, they had the wrong phone number for you saved. Maybe they used a different social media messaging than you're used to. Maybe they forgot to hit send, right? We've all been there. I've been there a ton of times, either with a work email or a text message or, a message on Facebook Messenger or like Instagram. And I'm like, why haven't they got back to me? I just realized I forgot to hit send. This is me venting right now. But again, just challenging that, like, hey, this is the only reason they didn't tell you about it, like, because they hate you. And then the new philosophy, I'm disappointed and sad I wasn't invited. It's okay to feel hurt, right? It's kind of that, okay, this isn't the end of the world, but it's okay, right? And that's what's, I mean, this is kind of a personal kind of viewpoint. I think I talked about it a little bit last week. I guess I should say this week, so I'm recording on Saturday, but, uh, and this is from the text, and this is just my view, is that like, you really, you got to you got to kind of tread water sometimes when dealing with emotions. You want people to change negative thoughts or change thoughts that brought them in to see you, but it's also like you want to give them the validity of like, hey, it's okay to not feel great all the time, right? Again, going back to my example of the yin and the yang, Ella said no one is perfect and no one is 100% terrible. Like we have, kind of ebbs and flows. And so I think part of that effective new philosophy is not just getting them to take a different path or try something different, but also like acknowledging why you felt that way and almost like softening it, right? So because this was horrible, she was feeling depressed, worthless, and she's saying everyone's hate me. But with the counselor, it's kind of like looking at it from a different angle and being like, okay, yeah, it's I'm not saying it's great, but is that the only reason these could happen? I know, like in a school setting, a lot of times I'm taking this route with like, why are your friends asking you about this? Number one, you're thinking they're probably nosy and just want to hear spread tea or gossip. Um, and you know what? That could be the case. And this is me kind of validating. You might be right, but if they're your friends, like I'm guessing it's because they care and they want to make sure you're okay. And I had a student, it was funny. I think I've talked about her a lot in class, but she was button heads with all of their teachers. Excuse me. And about 2, 3 weeks ago, she was button heads with her bio teacher, and he was bringing up like, "Hey, that's just my class you're failing. You're failing all your classes." And she's like, "Oh, so now he's getting into my business and blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, well, that could be. And I play an angle that, I don't know. I try to throw something in kids' faces. I'm like, listen, this is District 214. Like, this is a destination district. Like, it is tough to get a job in this district. So chances are, if you have a teacher in this district, they're pretty good. And I'm guessing, now you're saying he's being a jerk and he's just attacking you. Listen, you might be right. Again, it's that validation. But like, because it's so tough to get a position in this job and keep a position in this district, I'm guessing he's pretty good. And I'm guessing maybe he's just trying to show you like it's not just happening in his class. And maybe, he wants to make sure you're aware of this and make sure see if there's anything that can be done for you. And now they're best friends. So again, it's that delicate balance of, yeah, okay, you might be right, but like, let's take a look at it. So then what about the little guys? What about the little guys working with kids? Role playing, storytelling, and puppets. Yeah, and just the language you're using, the verbiage. You know, hey, that's irrational. Because I mean, what does that mean? I don't know what irrational means. So helpful versus unhelpful, right? I think with any of these philosophies, any of these theories, any of these approaches, I'm going to overgeneralize here, but just about all of them can work with kids. But no matter if they naturally do, or you got to kind of do a little, like it's really like just tweaking the language and making sure the language is appropriate for that age group. Role reversal, a counselor models rational self-talk and kid practices, right? So if you're trying to get them to, again, that frontal lobe's still developing, so they might take a while. They're like, I don't know what that means. Like, just view things different. Like showing them, well, hey, and let me show you if I'm you. You're thinking this, but if I thought this, what do you think about it? And then as they get older, can handle a little bit more challenge, may respond well to humor, right? They're a little bit older, so I don't want to say coddle, but I can't think of a better word right now. So again, just as they get older, things get a little bit easier to communicate with them. And then, as always, is it good and how does it work with a group of people? Yeah, positive outcomes, wide range of issues. So yeah, especially working with kids and adolescents, you're being direct, you are validating, you are challenging, you are showing that there's different ways to look at things, and then diversity could be good for different clients who prefer consultation or teacher, right? A lot of times, maybe going to a counselor and having to, spill all your stuff. It's intimidating and it's goes against what the culture believes. But if you kind of come to it and say, listen, yeah, I have the title as a counselor, but like in the way I practice, I'm not really a counselor. I'm like a teacher or a coach, and it's it's not going to seem like what you might think a normal counseling session is. Unconditional acceptance from self and others, work against bias and intolerance. So just being there for everybody. So that is the end of REBT. Now let us go to the big CBT. Now I'm guessing if I were a betting man, not if I were, I am not. Most of you in here are either coming from the data points correctly. Most of you are either looking at someone coming from a client-centered or person-centered perspective or a CBT perspective. So I am glad that we are covering this right now. No shock, right? What's the world I live in? I live in the school counseling world. A lot of school counselors probably operate from the CBT lens. I think it'll make sense. Uh, yeah, and we're just going to kind of take a look at how this works with kids, because again, we are talking about working with children or adolescents. So, what even is it? Got thinking, feeling, doing, but again, in simple terms, that our thoughts cause our feelings and behavior, not external things like people, situation, and events. So, yeah, it is pretty obvious with this. Oh, it just got close. It's pretty obvious with this that REBT is kind of a spin-off of CBT. It's a little bit some more centered. Um, it is right, not necessarily what happened or who happened or who is with us. It's how do we process what happened with them. And again, it's all about that thought pattern, right? If we go back to REBT, it's the B that leads to the C. It is the how do I perceive it? And so the goal is to help kids identify and change their unhelpful thinking patterns. If we can change our thoughts, we can change how we feel about it. Again, that placebo effect. It's pretty obvious why we're lumping these two together in the same week. Altering negative thought patterns to enhance emotional regulation. Several key techniques such as exposure therapy, and cognitive restructuring. So it's like being it's like being a thought detective, right? Kind of going in there and seeing like, why do I think about it this way, and can I change how I am thinking about it? Now, who is the big enchilada with this? It is Mr. Aaron Beck. I mean, look at this guy. I mean, just red bow tie. Pee Wee Herman is nothing on this guy. Not a damn thing with that red bow tie. Uh, so developed cognitive therapy. Again, another one. Started as a psychoanalyst and was like, okay, no mas. I am done with it. Different mental health challenges have specific thinking patterns. If we can connect those patterns, we can create lasting change, right? So again, it comes down to that thinking patterns. How do I think about it? How do I feel about it? How do I process it? How am I interpreting it? So the relationship with the client is a team effort, not confrontational. Again, another approach where, sometimes there might be an expert role here, but it is really just it's not about me. It is about us, right? It is taking the journey with you. It is understanding that we are working together, not confrontational, right? Because I think about, I'll be honest, at least with me and working with high schoolers, like sometimes you feel it here, like you feel like this is close. This is really close to becoming an argument, and that's not going to be good for anybody. So it's really trying to remember, like, hey, they are seeing me to work with me, not against me, right? If you are in the private sector, they have hired me or they are using their insurance to help them, not to argue with me. Not and my goal is to challenge them, but it's also remember, like, you know, again, I relate a lot of things to sports and basketball. I've challenged teammates as a coach. I've challenged players underneath me. I've challenged assistant coaches, but it's how you do it. It's like that building that respect. Like, hey, I'm going to challenge you, but it doesn't mean I don't care about you. Doesn't mean I don't think you're good at your job. Doesn't don't think think I'm not confrontational. Doesn't think make you. I don't want you to think that I'm right and you're wrong. But I am here to get the best out of you and help you be your best self. So yeah, cool. You can see right here. Had AI make this. Sorry, right? So there are layers to our thought, right? So we got this iceberg. So the automatic thought, this is in the moment. This is self-talk. This is right. So I am taking a student perspective, number one, again, because I'm a school counselor, but also number two, because we're working with adolescents, and chances are a lot of the stuff you're going to talk about somehow comes back to school. So automatically, I'm going to fail this test. I'm not ready. Right. And then we have this intermediate belief, which is just below the water. The rules or attitudes we live by. So again, going back to that REBT, it is those kind of thoughts, those societal thoughts. If I don't get an A, I'm a failure, right? If I'm thinking of students at the high school level, I'm thinking of if I don't, right now, like November 1st is today, and today is a big day because for a lot of schools, the early action application is due. If I don't get into this school, I'm a failure. You know, this week we're also starting course requests with our juniors. If I'm not taking all AP or if I'm taking a class that isn't an AP or a dual credit, I am a failure. So it's kind of that just pressure from the outside world, those rules we live by, and they are our rules, right? My rules might be different than your rules, but obviously, I think we can all understand that society plays a little bit of a role in that, right? And then the core belief, the fundamental beliefs we have about ourselves, the world, and others, often formed at childhood. So with these, we usually start at the top and kind of work our way down, and kind of these things kind of pull themselves out. So um, yeah, we usually start by noticing automatic thoughts and work our ways down. Now, that's not to say, you know, you could argue, and maybe I would argue, the core belief is really what drives everything, right? Especially if you are trauma informed or you're thinking of any other theories that really kind of look at how we are shaped throughout our life. But as far as us, so it says we start by noticing that's like the person. If I have something that is impacting me from childhood, my first thought is, oh, when I was 5 years old, it's like, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this? And what in my past? So makes sense that it kind of goes top down. Again, not going to be able to do this, but we are going to think of something you could do. Think about a recent time you felt stressed or upset. What was the situation? What was the automatic thought that popped in your head? So again, this is kind of that automatic thought, and just think how that could have shaped, that's the B. essentially. If we're thinking, if we're relating it to REBT, the ABCs, any more letters I could use. Um, Behavioral, right? The this happened, so how am I thinking about it, right? So the automatic thought in this example was, I have a test, and now my thought is I'm going to fail this test. Uh, and just think about, think of an example from your life, and just can you go, how deep can you go with the iceberg? I almost call it a glacier. I think the same thing, right? I'm sure one of you is like, no, actually, Brian, so just stop. um, but yeah, I mean, it kind of helps explain a lot if we can kind of start at the top and move down. Like, I had this thought, can I think of the rules related to this? Like, I'm going to fail this test, or I'm not going to do well on it. And then kind of saying like, how did I get here? Like, how did I get to this top surface? What underneath kind of built this up? Something to think about. So when our thinking gets twisted, cognitive distortions are common and helping thinking patterns that are often not based in reality. So here are a few common ones with kids: all or nothing. As I'm reading through these, I'm just gonna pause for a second, and I want you to think of your own. I have an example for some of these, but I want you to try to think of when you've seen a kid like act like this, or when, if you can remember a time you as a kid act like this. All or nothing. See things as black and white. If I don't get picked for the team, I'm a total loser. So take a second, excuse me, and think about when you could think of when a kid had an all or nothing thought. Okay. Catastrophizing, catastrophizing. You know what I'm trying to say. Expecting the worst case scenario, right? Being that pessimistic. I'm going to mess up my presentation and everyone will laugh at me. So let's think about a situation a kid had this. Okay. Mental filter, only paying attention to the bad stuff. Gets great feedback, but focuses only on the one tiny criticism. I mean, this one we just, I was talking about, like, I could definitely see a time when, like, my daughter has her first gymnastics meet of the season tomorrow, and she's nervous. And I'm like, but it's a mock meet, it's a scrimmage. And last season you got third in state all around, and you did this. And she's still like, yeah, I can do this. Like, I was asking her about her different stuff, and she was talking about her beam routine, and yeah, I know, and it's gonna be fine, and blah blah blah. But this one time I split the beam. I go, what the hell is that? And I guess it's when like your foot slips off and you kind of saddle it. And I didn't want, "Ugh." But like that happened to her one time, and she's been practicing this forever. So again, it's that mental filter where it's not like, hey, being optimistic all these other times. Every time I do the routine, I crush it. I could do this, or that. I'm getting better. Blah blah blah. It's the one time she messed up. So again, with kids or adolescents you're working with, not people telling you you're great, or your teacher being like, hey, that's amazing. It's when they said, hey, but you know what? You probably could do a little bit better. Overgeneralizing, overgeneralization. If I fail one test, I'm bad at school, right? I had a student I was working with last year having a panic attack. It was, and of course, she came in my office first day of school. I was able to leave. Our contract says we leave at 3:20. She came in at 3:17. I was there till 4:30, 4:45. It was the first day of school. It was the first day of school. I guess it was something where she got a B in her AP World History, and her teacher said if second semester she got above a 92% or something, he would change first semester to an A, and she got an 80, or she got a 90%. She was afraid to tell her parents, and blah blah blah. And it was just, if I have a B on my transcript, it's over. I'm done. They're not going to go to college. So with kids, adolescents, teenagers, a lot, you're going to get that overgeneralization. So so we'll just go over these. We were going to do it as a group and shout it out, but now you'll just think and I'll tell you. So a child plays a soccer game and scores a goal, but misses one shot. All they could think about after the game is that one shot. Give you a second to look at these. Survey says mental filter, right? Everything's going great, but it was that one thing they messed up on. Next example. A teen asks someone to the school dance and gets turned down. They think, and I missed a quote, no one will ever want to go out with me. Survey says overgeneralization. Broad conclusion based on one event. There's plenty of fish in the sea, brah. So dumb. And then the third one. A student is worried about an upcoming exam and thinks, if, again, I forgot a quote here. If I fail this test, my life is over and I'll never get into college. 3, 2, 1. Say it. Catastrophizing. Expecting the worst, right? So because I failed the test, because of this, it's done. So what do we, that's a solid bun. I would have looked good with a bun like that when I had a bun back in the day. What do we look like? What does a counselor look like in CBT? Well, obviously the first thing is relationship is key, is huge. It is a team. We are collaborative, right? And how am I going to be collaborative? I'm going to be warm. I'm going to be genuine. I'm going to be empathetic. Um, right? The co-investigator, clues about the child's thoughts. Again, it is a partnership. It is not me at you. Active, structured, goal-oriented approach. Just chatting, right? Just chatty Cathy's. Key phrase, collaborative empiricism. We're a team testing out the child's thoughts against reality. And again, CBT is coming back to it is not what happened, it is not who happened, it is not where it happened. It is how you think about what happened. So, what's a typical session look like? So, we got the check in. How you feeling today? How's it going? And then it's the agenda. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? And that's key. It is collaborative. It is not me saying, so today we're going to talk about this. It is, hey, I want you to have ownership in this. And again, with kids, anytime they have a voice, anytime they have a say, anytime they can say something that dictates something, like you got them. So review homework, whether you had them doing something outside of class or something something that just naturally has changed. So what did you notice or practice since the last time? So it could be I gave you something specific to do or talked about this last time. Now we're here today. What has changed with that? Work on a skill to problem, right? This is the big one. This is where we're focusing on what's something that you aren't liking, that you aren't perceiving, right? Like what's the B that led to the C? And now I am coming in. Assign new homework. So again, we just reviewed what we were working on from last time to this time. So now let's figure out what we're going to work from this time to next time we check in, right? But then we bring it back to what we did today. What are you taking away from today? How you feel about today? What are you processing from everything we did today? So again, this can be one of those examples if you're looking at this that you're like, yeah, common sense. This why do these have names? Then CBT might be your jam. For others of you, it's like, yeah, you know what? I could see this. Maybe it's not the direction I would go through, but I can see why this is effective. And you might be one of those friends that's taking elements from CBT and kind of putting in your tool belt. And then some of you might be saying, no, this isn't how I would do things. So the toolbox, right? As we talked about with with REBT, as kids get older into adolescence, they can handle that Socratic questioning. So with this, the counselor acts as a curious guide, asking questions to help the child examine their thoughts. And it's not and interrogation, right? So some example questions I pulled were, what's the evidence for that thought? Is there another way to look at it? What's the worst that could happen? Could you survive it? So again, it's not necessarily, it's challenging, but not directly challenging because you don't want it to be an interrogation. You're not trying to prove them wrong. You are just asking, hey, can we take a little bit of a deep dive into this, into these thoughts? I want you to examine it and really think, are these the thoughts you are having? Are these the thoughts that are going to get you where you want to go? And then the guided discovery, the counselor coaches the child on a voyage of self discovery to find their answer. So, kind of looking into what you are learning about yourself. What do you know about yourself? So, again, no partner activity because we're not in person. But yeah, again, maybe throw this in AI or maybe just think about it or maybe, try to process it on your own or maybe see if you could find some YouTube videos about Socratic questioning. Scenario, I'm not going to the party on Friday. No one will talk to me. I'll just stand in a corner by myself. It's going to be so awkward. Uh, so use the Socratic questioning to look at their thoughts, right? Again, reminder, some of the examples of the thoughts were, what is the evidence for that thought? Is there another way to look at this? What's the worst that could happen? Could you survive it? Right? Help them explore this thought. Again, you're not giving advice, right? In counseling, we want to try to avoid throwing our bias in there and telling students or clients what to do. Sometimes you could ask, like, I've done that where I've asked permission, like, hey, I worked with another student who was dealing with this. Do I have your permission to kind of share with you what they figured out and what worked for them? Just ask gentle, but since we're still practicing, right? Maybe to even avoid that, just ask gentle, curious questions. Again, it would be a good way to start to practice to kind of make this practical and make you kind of wrap your head around what it looks like. So anxiety and depression with CBT. Anxiety helps kids recognize they're anxious. And why are these two? Because it's a big thing we're dealing with kids. I'm thinking about, if I'm thinking about my students and, not everyone has to have a 504 plan to be dealing with something, some mental concerns, or emotions or situations, but like that's the easiest for me to process right now. A lot of my 504 plans have anxiety or depression on there along with ADHD, things like that. So these are two things you will see prevalent when working with people of the age that this class is focused on. So anxiety helps kids recognize their anxious feelings and challenge their what if thoughts. A program called Coping Cat is very effective. It involves education, relaxation, coping skills, and gradual exposure to what they fear. Right. So I would say take a Google or look on YouTube to kind of look at that in action. Tackles the cognitive triad of depression: negative view on themselves, negative view on the world, negative view on the future. Right. So if I think I suck, I'm going to think everyone's going to think I suck and not want to hang around with me, and I am going to be by myself forever. So again, focus on changing these core views and increasing pleasant activities. So why is this determining that? Like why is this, that's kind of that catastrophic view. Why is this kind of determining why you jump to that conclusion? Then we got anger, ADHD, CBT play therapy. So we'll skip to CBT play, a cool adaptation that uses play, puppets, and games to teach CBT concepts to younger kids, right? We get a lot puppets. I mean, who doesn't love a good puppet? Um, right, this is the first time I'm getting off track. Makes me think of there's a Simpson episode where I think someone says, maybe Marge says to Homer, everybody's afraid of something. And Homer goes like this, not everybody. And she goes, sock puppets. And he goes, where? And just runs out the room. So when I see puppets, that's always what I think of. But again, play therapy is really interesting because that's really where you're going to see with a kid what they're thinking, what they're processing, how they're dealing with things. Anger addresses distortions like thinking someone intentionally bumped into you in the hall, teaches problem solving skills, right? So it's the distortion of like, hey, this only happened because of the worst case scenario. That's that B in the ABCs. ADHD, help children with self instruction. What do I need? what do I need to do first? Self-monitoring and managing impulsivity, right? That's obvious. These are obviously big concerns with students who are struggling with, I shouldn't say struggling with, I apologize, students who are diagnosed with ADHD. Again, we're going to skip this. Why is it so important to adapt these techniques like play therapy or worksheets when working with children versus adults? What could go wrong if you just tried to talk to a 7-year old like a 30-year old? Again, I think that comes back to what we talked about long ago with children are not just little adults and kind of creating that walled garden, how verbiage can really help. You want the student, sorry, again, you want the child, adolescent to feel a part of the conversation. So if you're using big words that they don't understand or they can't process, you're obviously not going to get much out of it. But think of some other reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. So CBT, our shapes, our thoughts shape our reality. Thought detectives, right? Like identifying why this isn't the only way to think about it and how thinking about it in a certain way can be detrimental. It's a partnership, right? Sometimes I need to play the expert role, but essentially we are in this together. Uh, it's shown to definitely address many common childhood concerns and make it fun and developmentally appropriate. Make it so that the person you're working with feels like they're a part of it and they can kind of go along with everything you're doing. So different thoughts about this, right? We were going to talk, but just take a second, kind of reflect on CBT and let's even REBT and think about, is this something I can wrap my head around? Can I see it working with kids? Can I see it working with myself in my own practice? And then a reminder for this week, either the counselor interview or discussion board 6, depending on when you did what. And then ultimately quiz 7. So yeah, that's all we got for this week. It was a pleasure. If you have any questions or concerns, hit me up. Otherwise, I will see you guys not this Thursday, but next Thursday. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye bye.